The reason why school exists at all is because writing is very powerful and writing is hard to learn. That's why schools came to exist. It was like, oh, we need to teach children how to write. This is so important. And they don't just learn how to write like they learn how to talk. So we need some sort of method to teach them. This is how schools got invented in the 6th century BCE. And it's their main reason for existing today, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with using a tool to kind of accomplish a task, but I think that there's something wrong with centering on that. I think you're not seeing what you're missing in life if you don't have this ability.
Hello and welcome back to the Hannah Frankman Podcast. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Matt Bateman. You may remember Matt from previous appearances on the show. Matt is one of the co-founders of Guidepost Montessori, the largest network of Montessori schools in the world. Today on the show, Matt and I dug deep into AI in education. We talked about some of the big developments over the past couple of years since ChatGPT was opened up to the public. We talk about the cheating epidemic in traditional schools with the emergence of AI, whether or not that's a bad thing and how to combat it. We talk about some of the different AI projects in the education space and the reasons why Matt is and isn't excited about them. And we talk about how to think about preparing kids for a world that is infused with AI and how to think about some of the components of a traditional education and why they may still be important for kids to be learning, even when the actions can be outsourced to something like ChatGPT. This was a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy listening. Matt, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Hannah.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. I've wanted to have you back on the podcast for a while, both because you're just really fun to talk to, but also because you've gone deep down the rabbit hole over the past few months with AI in education. And we haven't talked about that a lot here, but everybody on the internet's talking about it. And there's a lot happening in the space that I think is really important to understand and to at least be aware of, if not have opinions on, if you're working in innovation and education in any capacity, because the technological possibilities have changed very dramatically over the past couple of years. So I wanted to have you back on the show to talk about all of this and go down whatever other rabbit holes, Montessori or otherwise, that this conversation may take us on. Anyone who's listened to the previous episodes know that's highly possible.
Yeah. I've gone relatively deep down this rabbit hole, but not as deep as some people. So just, buyer beware.
But you've been experimenting with AI, not just for personal use, but also in various education capacities. I know you've gone deep in the weeds with a few different companies who are building different AI products for kids, but you're also using AI with your kids, right?
I have tried, yes.
Your kids who are 4 and 1.
Yeah, it's the 4-year-old who's mostly at the receiving end. Yeah.
What are you using? You've shared little Twitter excerpts of conversations Alice has had with AI chatbots. What do you have her using?
It's funny. The first thing we tried, this is on my desk. This isn't the first thing we tried, but this is. Are your viewers going to be able to see video, or is it going to be audio?
Most of them can see video.
Okay, so this is a toy called Grok. No relationship to Twitter's Grok. It just happened to be named that at the same time that Twitter was naming its AI tool. And let me just unzip it here. Inside of this thing is this.
For anyone who can't see it, it's just a cute little stuffed animal with an electronic box inside of it.
And it's got a box inside of it. And this box is a voice interface that connects to the internet, that connects to AI servers, and children can talk to it. And I think this thing is voiced by Amanda Grimes. But AI generated voice based kind of with her consent on, she kind of worked on the project. And it's like, I think that the idea behind this toy, or at least the original idea behind it, we haven't used it in a while, which I'll get to in a second. But the idea behind it was like, hey, have you ever seen Toy Story? Like, toys have personalities. Like they have goals, they have dreams, they have fears. Like they might even interact with one another while you're not present. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we made like it seems like AI tech is there such that we could give kids toys personalities and they could interact with it, and like all sorts of possibilities open up. And so that's basically what this is. It's a toy with a personality. Um, that's the goal anyway. Kind of in practice, what it is, it's a chat bot. It's a voice activated chat bot that a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old can talk to. I think Alice was 3 when I gave this to her for the first time. I got it last winter, so it's about a year old, this toy. And I I mean, I just did it as an experiment to see what she would do. Um, she was really, really interested in it for like 48 hours. And she would have conversations like, "Are you alive? Most rocket ships aren't alive." Like she was like trying, and it would answer her like, and she was trying to triangulate. And there were frustrations too, very common frustrations with these AI voice activated tools about like, she would try to interrupt it and it wouldn't listen to her. She would ask it to sing a song it doesn't know how to sing. Like, some of these things will get ironed out as the technology improves. But even apart from those, I think she lost interest in it. And that pattern of wow, like a kid of all ages, like using character AI or ChatGPT or whatever, like just like the initial wow factor of like, what the F? Like, is this thing human? What is this? And they're like really into it, and you want to see what you can do with it. And you want to see if you can stump it, and like you want to see all the questions that it can answer, and you use it, and then like within 72 hours, it's like in the closet, and you've forgotten about it. That is very normal in this space. It's very, very, very normal. High wow factor, often which leads to purchase. Extremely low stickiness. Almost all of these products have really serious user retention problems. By these products, I mean kind of edutainment toys for children.
Not strictly AI related, but more broad.
No. AI related edutainment toys for children.
Got it. Okay.
Like some sort of child AI toy, often with an educational component, at least, kind of like that's part of the slogan, like even if it doesn't really have much to do with that. And yeah, I mean, I've done other things with her too, but that pattern is pretty common.
So what is it that causes the loss of interest so quickly? Because it's obvious why a child would be fascinated by it at the onset, but why does that burn out so fast?
It's not that obvious what to do with it. Like, why would you pick it up and talk to it? Is it because you want to know something? Well, what are your current paths for wanting to know something? You could ask a grown-up, you could ask, if you're older, you could ask Wikipedia or YouTube, you could ask, I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you could go about learning things. Like, what is the benefit of picking up this toy and talking to it, or typing something into a chatbot box? I use AI all the time. Most of my usage is a kind of Google replacement, like query replacement. Like I just ask it questions and I get answers and I have a back and forth with it. I love it for that purpose, but I don't think it's not obviously better at having that kind of back and forth for children than a typical grown-up, at least in its current form. I also just think that the model of like, in a certain way, it's a solution looking for a problem. Like, what problem does this solve for children, or what kind of value does it bring to children? I think that, I mean, what children need is the ability to do things, and the ultimate toy in this respect is something like Legos. The ultimate software for children is something like Minecraft or Factorio or a word processor where they can write things and print things. And then in terms of other kinds of experiences, like being able to like build a shed in your backyard, or being able to cook a meal, or like, I mean, this is what I think of as the bread and butter of childhood. And it's not that obvious. I mean, you could say like, maybe you could ask AI to help you do things, but the AI isn't that good at that. It doesn't know what's in your house. It doesn't know how to help you step by step. It doesn't provide nearly as good guidance as like an older friend who's there to help you figure things out. So, or a YouTube video. Yeah, I think that that's at least where the technology is at right now in terms of children. I would say of my children's age up through elementary school, maybe middle school. I think it gets a little bit different for older children.
Is part of the value proposition for this less so for the child and more so for the adult, where it can replace the adult and having to have the sort of incessant conversations that children sometimes want to engage in, where they ask you why a dozen times about something and then bring up the same conversation the next day and want to know why all over again? Is that part of the value proposition? It's not actually for the kids, it's for the parent.
That does not feel like a real problem to me. So I'm trying to decide how much of this is idiosyncratic to my parenting. I don't think this is totally idiosyncratic to me. I don't think that parents or teachers, they might jokingly say, like my kid asks why a zillion times and it's exhausting. But I don't think that that's actually a real complaint that anyone has.
I don't have children yet, so I don't know, but I've heard it many times from people. I saw somebody shared a meme on social media a day or two ago that was a picture of Yoda, and the caption just says, "Now that I have a toddler, I understand why Yoda just died after Luke Skywalker asked him too many questions."
I mean, I think that there's something to that, and it's a funny joke. At the same time, like, as soon as that toddler goes to bed and the parents are sitting together, like what they do is they say, like, "Oh my God, she asked me the cutest questions. Like you're not going to believe what she asked me." Now the
So true.
annoying thing about why questions for toddlers, this is a little bit of a tangent, but is not when they want to know something. That's even if you don't know how to answer, even if you're tired, like that's like amazing. It's core of what it means to be human. It's why you have children, right? Is to have these conversations. And certainly teachers, I don't think feel like, why does this child have so many questions? The annoying thing is when they say why, not because they want to know something, but because they don't like what you're saying. And so, and one level in, like it's like you say, like, okay, like it's time to get into the car, like we're going to grandma's or whatever it is. Like, oh, why? Like, to what extent? Sometimes you like, like we talked about this, like we're going to see grandma. Sometimes you do want to give the reason. Sometimes it's like that, like there's nothing that you could say that would satisfy that question, because they're not actually asking because they want to know why. They're asking because they don't want to get into the car. And that 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds get very good at using why as an objection, as a kind of interrupter. And I think that that's what parents complain about often. And they confuse the non-cognitive why, the why, why is an objection, why is a procrastination technique, with the why, I want to understand why.
So what flips, because you said that most AI tools are not terribly useful for kids earlier in their development and arguably through middle school. What flips when they start to enter their adolescence that makes it become useful, and what is the utility at that point?
So high school students, even if you ignore all of ed tech and everything that's being developed in education specifically, high school students use AI in a variety of ways, and it's becoming increasingly normal for them. I think even a year ago, it was becoming pretty normal. I don't know exactly what the state of things is now. But you can say, like I took AB calculus last spring, and now it's fall, and I'm taking BC calculus, and I don't remember. Can you just like give me a problem set with 10 questions that will refresh my memory on, like, if I can solve these questions, it'll refresh my memory on all the rules of differentiation and all the tricks and techniques, and it will generate a problem set for you. And it will, and then you can give answers, and it can help you troubleshoot those answers. Like if you're a sophisticated user, like, something approaching a grown-up, which I think 14, 15-year-olds are something approaching a grown-up. Certainly 16, 17, 18-year-olds are. You can use it like grown-ups use it. And if you're a grown-up that's and it's your job to learn something, certainly to learn something in a school environment, there are a lot of things that you can get it to help you with. Especially if you're a little bit agential and a little bit clever about it. And so I think one common use case is you start to see students kind of ad hoc using it as a tutor, effectively, using it as a kind of personal learning service / tutor / Google replacement / general educational tool. students also use it to cheat. So that's, I think it's probably high school is the first time that really comes online. And certainly I think it's probably a bigger problem in college. So you have a word calculator that can write essays for you and like answer really complicated questions that you would have had to look up in a book previously instantaneously. And it can do it in a flexible way where like the teacher might have Googled, like, 3 years ago, a teacher could have Googled something about, I don't know, the what uprisings in Sparta or something like that, and been like, okay, like I can see that nobody's answered the following questions online strictly yet. Like there are good resources available. Like this is a good question to ask. Like you no longer have that power as a teacher because you can ask large language models anything and they can, give 95% decent answers. So
that the cheating thing is one of the biggest objections to AI that I see on the internet and particularly on Twitter. And there's a few of them that come up frequently that I want to get into with you. But cheating is one of the big ones. And people feel like the explosion of AI is just degrading from the quality of a classroom education because it's so easy for kids to go look up answers to things and to cheat. And it's making it harder and harder to maintain integrity in assignments and grading set assignments because sometimes you can't even tell if something was written by ChatGPT or if it was written by a student. And people are really cynical about AI because of that. And I'm curious what your take is.
I think that that's happening. So the first thing is to say that this is not a fake concern. This is not like a bunch of people sitting in a room imagining what might happen with AI. This is 100% happening. Something like, I can't remember when it was, like 9 months ago, 12 months ago, the company that I helped found and still help out with a lot, Guidepost Montessori, started to see its first AI generated written interview question responses. So people that were applying to jobs, they get past the first interview. You submit a video sample of your teaching. We might ask you to like submit a sample lesson plan or something. And we were getting very clearly AI generated answers to those lesson plans that, we can talk about that. I mean, you could even say like, what's wrong with that? Like teachers can use AI to generate lesson plans, but we started seeing that like 100% people are using Claude and ChatGPT and who knows what else on their college essays, on their classroom assignments, like, and it is, I don't teach at the university level anymore, but if I did, I would probably be varying the assignment structure to make that maybe not impossible, but to make it so that when it happened, when it could happen, it was like part of a structure that I was comfortable with. So yeah, I think that like 100% is happening.
I think it's obvious if you talk to teenagers that it's happening just by the way in which they talk about trying to hack assignments and make them easier and figure out efficient shortcuts to getting their work done. Like, of course it's happening. It's in their nature to do so. I think in my mind, the question isn't so much, is it happening? The question is, one, how bad of a thing is it? And two, what do you do about it? Because we live in a world where AI now exists. It's infiltrating everything. It's not going anywhere. You can make all the rules you want about AI not being allowed in your classrooms. Kids are going to use it anyway. You can make all the rules you want around how assignments are structured to try to mitigate the possibility for cheating, including things like having kids write essays inside the classroom or something where they're supervised and it's harder for them to go on ChatGPT and have AI write it for them. And I think the question is less, is it happening, and more like, what is the right approach to handling it? Is the best approach to mitigate the usage of it? Or are we thinking about the question to too much through the lens of, well, this is what we've always done, and so we have to keep doing it and figure out how to keep AI from infiltrating what we've already done or always done, versus thinking about how to use AI constructively?
So let me answer this question in two parts. So part one is a little bit cynical. So the cynical, I don't know, cynical is the right word. We have an education system that, in my opinion, is not great, and is especially not great with respect to writing related subjects. So that includes writing, like, which I think of is properly thought of as composition. And that also includes literature and history, and like topics that English, social studies, like things that you would have to write essays for. In college, that's a lot more things, like philosophy classes, psychology classes. Well, maybe not in psychology classes as much, but all the humanistic subjects. I don't think that the education in these domains is that high quality in general. And I don't think that students are learning how to write that well in it. So if you totally take away AI, if you kind of rewound the clock two full years to the day before ChatGPT was launched. I don't know if that was literally the day before. I think it launched in November of 2022. If you the state of things was awful. The state of things is most students learn to write very hackneyed 5-paragraph essays that nobody else reads, and that kind of writing practice that you get in school is completely separate from any kind of writing that you would do in real life, like emails to friends or text messages or things that you would write on a blog or something like that. Like, all of that is extra academic. And most students don't even understand why they're in school or taking these subjects. A lot of people who are in college don't understand why they're in college, or why there are kind of required classes, and they just want to get them out of the way. And so you have a lot of low motivation students who are already pretty cynical about the system being forced, with more or less coercive power, depending on exactly where they are in their education, to write things that they don't want to write and that they don't understand why to write. So that was and it doesn't really work that well. It's not like colleges weren't producing fantastic writers. Like, I mean, people have been lamenting this for years, the decreasing quality and kind of literacy and compositional capacity of Americans.
As someone who hires writers, good writers are very hard to find.
Yeah. So into that system, you inject ChatGPT. What are students going to do? They're going to use it to not do the stuff that they don't want to do. How bad is that? I don't think it's great. I mean, but I don't think it's like the primary problem to think about. It's bad for your soul to cheat. So if you're a student and you're listening to this, don't cheat. Like, it doesn't really matter that much what grade you get at the end of the day. It's just saving you a little bit of time, and like you should think about other ways around this problem. This deception is not good. It's also not good to get less writing practice. I think writing is a really valuable skill, and I do think that it should be part of general education. I think that people should learn it. I think that it should be motivated and contextualized and taught properly, and that our expectation is that the average person should be quite a good writer. That if you have that capacity, you've been given a power tool in life that's going to carry you very far. And if you don't have that capacity, like, you're really missing out on something great. Students weren't really developing that prior to large language models, and now they're probably developing it less.
Can we go down that rabbit hole for a second? Because this
Sure.
is interesting. And I'm inclined to agree with you. Being able to write relatively well and express my thoughts clearly has been extremely important to my intellectual and professional development and my development as a person. And I'm a very big advocate for both reading good writing and also learning how to write well. So I agree with you about the importance of it. I think it is something that is a shame we have lost. But clearly this was a problem long before ChatGPT entered from stage left. This already existed. It was already problematic. We already were doing a terrible job teaching kids to write. Why are we so bad at this? What's missing?
There's 3 or 4 things that I could say. I mean, there's a lot of things bad about our approach. I'm just going to kind of hit you with a shotgun blast of things that are bad. One is I don't think that we're that good at core literacy.
Mm-mm.
And we're not that good at getting students interested in quality literature. So if you just kind of look at the early parts of education, like how do we teach children to read? How do we teach children to relate to texts? What are the quality of texts that we're relating them to? How good are we at getting them to relate to very high quality texts, both fiction and nonfiction, in the context of classes like English and history, poetry, things like that. I mean, we're mostly worse at doing those things. We're actually better at teaching literacy than we used to be, core literacy, than we were, say, I don't know, 150 years ago. But for most of those other things, we're worse at it. I think we've kind of lost ambition around making students who are exceptional readers connected to kind of cultural works of high quality. So, I mean, just taking that away, like you've taken away a lot of the raw material out of which a good writer is made. Second, most of what you do in school writing is completely artificial. The audience is the teacher. You are not writing an essay, you are cosplaying writing an essay in order to get a grade. And that has, like, I've given assignments like that, you know. I was a college professor. I've taught in a variety of contexts at various levels. But having that be the focus, a kind of artificial process for like most of the serious writing that you do for years and years and years and years, and having that embedded in a context that like students are often very alienated from, even if they're not actively alienated from it, like I hate school, it's just like they're playing the school game, like writing is part of the school game. Like that's not a good way to learn how to do something very authentically. The third thing is there people are going to disagree with me about this one, but I think it's true. I think learning some of the building blocks that you need to be a good writer include things like the formal study of grammar. You don't need it. This is why people are going to object. Like, I know all sorts of other, like, I'm a good writer and I've never taken grammar in my life. You just pick up the grammar of your language naturally. Like, and there's something to those arguments, but I think having it as a component of education is one of these power tools that allows you to kind of take more conscious command of what you're writing and what you're reading in some cases when it's complicated. And to express yourself more clearly. So I think that's another piece there. I mean, there are a million things like this, where it's like we've kind of neutered writing. And yeah, I mean, more than anything that I've said, I think the fact that students are in school for, between the ages of 5 and 22 and have schools pretty disconnected from life, and students don't really, they're kind of going through the motions and they understand that there's something fake about it. That is the biggest problem. I mean, that kind of underlies all the other problems.
I want to dissect both this and the using AI to write your essays problem, both from a very utilitarian perspective for a second, because at the end of the day, the goal is to educate kids who are competent and intelligent and who can go out and attain the life outcomes that they've decided they desire. And you can be a purist about, well, kids should be very good writers, but you have to have a pragmatic why to really sell the point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's true.
And I want to look at both sides of this pragmatically, because I think there are a couple different arguments that get lost in the shuffle of people just calling each other wrong on the internet when they're debating this sort of thing, that I actually want to break out. So if you have a student who is not a good writer anyway, they have not gotten strong writing instruction, and they're using ChatGPT to write their essays, which would have been, just practically speaking, would not have been well-written essays to begin with because they haven't yet learned the skill of good writing. The first question baked into that is what is being lost by them outsourcing the writing of a bad essay? Like, I think that's worth breaking down. The second question is, if they are already bad at writing, they're going to go out in the world and have a very poorly developed skill that they're trying to leverage anywhere where writing is required. And likely in the real world, they will be outsourcing it to ChatGPT anyway. So from a pragmatic standpoint, how much is using ChatGPT to write their essays actually diminishing from their ability to go out in the world and create the outcomes that they need to land a job where they're using ChatGPT to write the essay versus writing a poorly written essay? Like, I understand that the goal really is to teach kids how to write well. But again, like, what is the utility of that too, very practically speaking? And how does that relate to the real world scenario of kids using ChatGPT to cheat on essay assignments that would have been poorly written anyway, that aren't being read by a broad audience, and that are preparing them to write in other real world capacities that probably also aren't going to be read by broad audiences and aren't necessarily required for their life outcomes? I'm not asking any of these things because I am defending the cheating.
Yeah.
I want to take this, I want to move this whole thing slowly in the direction of preparing kids for reality and what is and isn't necessary. But I think there's a lot of nuance to this that we can just kind of assume is important. But I think it's actually important to make the case for why for each of these. Because I don't think just being a purist in one direction or the other, I hear both sides of it, and I think both are kind of missing something.
So writing allows you, writing not using LLMs, just like writing with this pen on this piece of paper that's in front of me, what that allows you to do is to take your thoughts and put them on a piece of paper. And there's a million other things that you can do with writing, but that's the kind of core use case. You can use writing to author a fictional world. You can use writing to do math. There's all sorts of things that you can do with writing, but just the capacity to put a thought that you have on a piece of paper. When you have done that, you can look at that thought and you can see this thought outside of your head written on a piece of paper. You can read it. You can reflect on it. You can edit it. You can be like, is this really precise? No, here's a more precise formulation. And you can wordsmith it. And now that it's outside of your head, your capacity to complexify it, to simplify it, to divide it into parts, to kind of like place it, situate it within a broader piece of writing, a broader argument, a broader kind of train of thought. Like, writing is it's hard to, it's so obvious. What I'm saying is so obviously true that it's hard to convey how great writing is. The amount that you can do on the page or in a word processor with your own thoughts, not even getting to communicating with people, just like writing them down and getting clear and seeing it yourself, is immensely more. It is so much easier to do that than it is to just sit there and think about things. Maybe it's not easier, maybe it's harder, but like the results that you get are better. The ceiling for coherence, complexity, your ability to kind of like take your own thinking and go through multiple drafts of your thinking, and then those are now your thoughts. Like, you can do drafts of your thoughts and kind of see them evolve on the page. It's such a powerful tool. So, this is the reason to learn writing and to be good at writing. And this is why I think you should think of it as composition and not as primarily you're writing 5-paragraph essays to fill an assignment. It's the ability to articulate yourself and to review, reflect, and edit your own thoughts. Also, it lets you share your thoughts with others. And that is no small thing. So I don't want to minimize that. Like, you're taking a piece of yourself, of your mind, that was previously probably mostly internal to your mind. At best, something that you speak, and that's kind of like dust clouds in the clouds in the desert. I can't remember what the Dawkins phrase is. It's something very ephemeral. And you can take this crystallized thought and share it with others, and it can get out there and it can influence other people's thinking, and then it can be their thoughts. And I mean, it's an incredibly powerful technology, unbelievably powerful technology. It changed culture dramatically. The reason why school exists at all is because writing is very powerful and writing is hard to learn. That's why schools came to exist. It was like, oh, we need to teach children how to write. This is so important. And they don't just learn how to write like they learn how to talk. So we need some sort of method to teach them. This is how schools got invented in the 6th century BCE, and it's their main reason for existing today, to be honest. Like, I mean, that's been a constant throughout history. So it's just, I think if that's what I center on. Do you have this ability to use a power tool for your own thinking by externalizing it in the form of writing, editing it, redrafting it, sharing it with others? I don't know how to fully answer the objection of, what if you're going to go through life where you're in the email mines and like you're drafting, like HR emails that are the least likely to get you sued, and this is your job and you want to be able to send those out, but you're not a strong writer, and so you externalize it to ChatGPT. Like, what's wrong with that? I mean, there's a sense in which there's nothing wrong with using a tool to kind of accomplish a task, but I think that there's something wrong with centering on that. I think you're not seeing what you're missing in life if you don't have this ability. Um, Everybody needs to think. So that, I mean, and writing is a power tool for thought. That's my kind of argument for it. So wait, let me pause there before I get to the second part of your question, which is to imagine this student. Is there anything that you want to say before I go on?
No, I have thoughts, but I suspect you're going to answer some of them in what you have to say. So I'm going to hold my tongue.
I mean, so this student that you're picturing, who's like not that strong of a writer and doesn't really like writing, you're picturing like a college student or something like that?
Yeah, high school, college, somewhere in that last transitionary phase from being a child to being a young adult.
I mean, there's no Kantian moral imperatives in the world that say that you have to write. I think it's a benefit that I think everybody, as an educator and as a parent, like the idea of not making my children strong writers. I'm like, what? Like, I'm cutting them short. That's like, I'm not giving them an inheritance. Like it's crazy. Like, I mean, that's kind of how I think about it. I don't think about it as like, if you're not a strong writer and you haven't been properly educated and inspired to do this, which is probably largely not your fault, by the way. It's probably the fault of your kind of surrounding culture that has failed to recognize the power of internalizing a literary society. And now you don't like it that much and you're not that good at it, and you're kind of thinking about how to get through life without doing it as much. Like, I could try to argue this student into it. I could try to make a case for them. I could try to design a curriculum that starts from what is more familiar and fun to them in writing and kind of builds up from there. I mean, there's all sorts of tricks that you can use if you're a good teacher or a good tutor to try to get this student to write. But like, I don't think it's not crazy, the path that they're taking. I just don't think it's the best path. Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of like, I mean, I recommend to some of our staff at Guidepost Montessori that they use ChatGPT to draft emails, and it's better than what they would write in a lot of cases, the draft. And then I say edit it. I mean, we haven't even gotten into talking about how you can use ChatGPT as not just a cheating replacement writing tool, but as a tool. I mean, I'm extremely biased in this whole conversation, by the way. Like, so again, buyer beware. I have written 500 to 1,000 words a day every day of my life for the past 24 years. So like, and I use AI now a lot. So I'm an extreme outlier here. Most people don't need to write that much and shouldn't need to write that much. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say to that student. I would say cheating's not good for you. Don't cheat. If you're in a job where you can produce an artifact using ChatGPT that's good enough for the job and to get paid, I have no problem with doing that. I would worry about the long-term future of that skill set. So like something that an LLM can write today such that it's good enough I mean, LLMs today aren't that they're not that good at writing. So, you're looking at being automated out of a job in some capacity. But I mean, that those are all just kind of tactical considerations. I don't think I don't think that there's anything wrong with using ChatGPT to draft things if that's where you're at in life. Does that answer the question? I don't even know if it answers the question.
No, it does. I think. Well, I mean, it was a broad question. It wasn't aimed at a very specific answer. It was aimed at a dissection of the problem, because this isn't simple. If it was simple, it wouldn't be problematic. And there are a lot of differing forces at play that affect an individual's both how they're using something like ChatGPT in the first place, but also how it is affecting them and the trajectory they're on. Like it's complicated. But I think this is a helpful dissection of the pieces. So yes, it did answer the question. You are a very skilled writer. You're writing very thoughtful, often very nutrient dense content. There's a lot in it.
That's a nice way of saying that my writing is inaccessible and difficult.
That's not at all what I meant. I don't
But
mean
it's
it's
true. You could have been saying
dry.
that, and that would have been true.
I'm not saying it's, fibrous and chewy. I'm saying it's full of good stuff. There's a lot of substance to it in a good way. But you're dealing with complicated ideas, and you're doing so very adeptly and for many real world applications. How are you using AI in your writing process?
So, I mean, the simplest way that I use it is for copy editing. So I have kind of custom rules set up, and I mostly use OpenAI's tools. So ChatGPT. Sometimes I use Claude. So Anthropic's tools. But I have a kind of custom instruction set up where that I can ask it to edit something. I will paste in, somewhere between 250 and 2,000 words of text, and it will give me back structured edits. Like this was the old sentence. This is the sentence that I'm recommending. Here's the reason for the change. And so I can review each of the edits. And ideally, I would like this process to be more automated than it is. Like I'm imagining a near future in which there's like an auto suggest changes in Word where you can kind of like accept and review. But for some reason, even though Microsoft is like heavily invested in AI and has a lot of partnerships with OpenAI, the AI tooling for Word sucks so far. So it's still early days. So copy editing, and it's useful for copy editing. It's like having infinite high school students to copy edit your writing. Like they catch typos and they make recommendations, and usually most of what I want it to do is just look for mistakes, literal mistakes. But I do sometimes want some suggestions for clarity because my writing is fibrous and chewy. It's useful.
It's not.
It's useful to have somebody say like, maybe the sentence should have like less than 17 commas. The main thing that I use AI for in my writing is as a knowledge tool. So like to say like, like when exactly did John Dewey, like I know that John Dewey left his lab school in the late 1900s, and then he went to New York, and then he started another school. Like what are the exact dates there? And like I can ask it some questions about was he working with Kilpatrick in Chicago, or was that more of a New York thing? Like when exactly did he become? I could just have a conversation with it. And it's like you're having a conversation with Wikipedia. You're having a conversation with the subconscious of the internet. Can you trust it all the time? No, but like it's not that hard to develop the habits where you can like get the knowledge to a point where like you can more easily look it up, and it still saves you a lot of time. Like it's really useful.
As my friend Taylor Foreman says, sometimes the subconscious hallucinates. You can't always trust it, but sometimes it's right.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think my mental model for what LLMs are is it is the subconscious of the internet. Like that's how I think about it. Like and that's an amazing thing that the internet has a subconscious that you can query. But it's not thinking. Like it's not going through a conscious reasoning process. And it's often really bad at things that start to get, like, the more philosophical you get or intellectual you get, or the more you need to kind of like be clear on the steps and the reasoning and the arguments, the worse LLMs do. So it's terrible at philosophy in particular.
So there are a few interesting threads here. One of the things that bothers me a little bit about the way people talk about AI and students is this sort of Luddite puritanism of kids just shouldn't have access to this and we just shouldn't use it because it's messing up the way we teach, which doesn't always work. But there's this sort of almost purity culture about it, where we just shouldn't touch it because it's bad. And in my mind, that is clearly not effective, because you tell, the classic, you tell kids they can't have something and then they want to have it. You're forbidding something that you have to forbid for a reason, because it's interesting and useful and shiny and kids are going to want to use it. So there's going to be this incessant struggle. But we also live in a world that for likely forever now will be infused by AI. It's in everything. It's going to continue to expand in terms of reach and impact, and kids are going to be engaging with it once they enter adulthood for the rest of their lives in very often probably formative ways. And so it feels like you're trying to, in some ways, educate in an old model for a world that no longer maps onto the model that it was created for. Like, you're educating kids for a world that doesn't have AI instead of preparing them for a world that does. And that always bothers me when people start arguing about the cheating problem, because I think there's something that is being missed, which is we're also not preparing kids to be in a world where this is a tool that they have access to in very positive ways, but also is going to change the things that they have to do. Like, being able to write and to think and to reason is innately human and innately valuable, but it's not always going to be valuable in the same ways that it used to be. You're using ChatGPT to copy edit. The entire field of copy editing may, in the semi-near future, be relatively obsolete. You're not going to need to hire a copy editor to proof your work. If you're a, personal blogger or something, you can just publish it because you have tools that can now catch the things that you used to require a human to be able to do. And they're infinite, relatively infinite, beyond the capacity of a individual human to count instances in which this is going to be true. So you're not preparing kids for the same world anymore. You're preparing them for one where they have to be able to think about how they use AI and how they interface with it instead of fighting it.
I'm sympathetic to that, but I think it kind of operates at that kind of argument doesn't operate at the right level of generality. Like, the problem is worse than that. Like, the problem is that we're not preparing children to do anything. We're preparing them to be low agency and to please teachers in clever ways by cosplaying on what they're asked to do. Like, I mean, the extent to which school doesn't prepare you for life is just doesn't prepare you for anything like a meaningful life is just astonishing. And I'm talking here about general education, like that. Like, there are, if you go to medical school, you will learn how to be a doctor. But in general, like, it's not like school was teaching kids how to get ready for the pre-AI world just fine. Now schools need to catch up so that they're like, the schools weren't doing that. So I just like, okay. So just to get to the AI, does that make sense before I go on? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then getting to the AI part, I think that there's an interesting educational pedagogical question about to what extent new technology should be integrated into education. And you don't have to take, so I'm very much not a Luddite. Like, I give my kids access to everything, and I try to think about ways to kind of interpolate it into their development and their education.
cue the
But
stuffed robot with the chat bot in it again from stage right.
with the chat bot in it. But also, like, Alice sends text messages, my 4-year-old daughter. And that was not a small part of how she learned how to read. And we were very deliberate in kind of how we set that up and how that interfaced with the literacy education that she got at her Montessori school, which is also a very specific kind of scope and sequence. So what is the relationship of this to that? I mean, we could talk about that. But part of the reason why I did it is to teach her how to write and read. Part of the reason is that I want her to have a positive relationship to technology. And that is hard. Like, I don't think that, I think a lot of people have a pretty broken relationship with technology today. And parents are very nervous about technology. And I think that there are reasons for that, good reasons. Like, it's, if you open YouTube Kids, like you're going to be hit with sewage. And like, overstimulating, like low nutrient, like garbage.
Not
And
something Matt would have written.
and that's also true, by the way, of like, that's just true of the modern world. It's true of the internet. It's true that it's I think it's most apparent with on screens, which is why people have this concept of screen time and they think that all sorts of terrible things happen on screen time. It's also true in like children's literature, like Scholastic Books now, the main school bookstore, is garbage even compared to what it was 30 years ago. And I don't think it was that great 30 years ago when I was a kid. I like it, But what exists now is way worse than Animorphs and Goosebumps. And Animorphs and Goosebumps weren't that great. So there I think to be one of 3 or 4 things that's distinctive about modern parenting is that if you're going to be intentional about your parenting, you have to be a slop filter. And if you are a slop filter, your main battle is going to be with the internet. So there's a lot of very reasonable and very understandable kind of resistance anxiety to this. And then AI to some extent just gets swept up with that. Like, it's just like another thing. And again, understandably, like Google search results are now populated by AI generated slop. Like it's not a crazy thing to think like this is just like the essays that the students write with AI will just be slop, and like the answers that it gives you like are full of hallucinations, and everything is going to be generic and corporatized and in HR speak because that's how LLMs talk. Like, I mean, there are a lot of reasonable worries in this space. I just think it's easier than people think it is to take the good without the bad. Like if you're intentional about your parenting and your education, you can have screen time that's good. You can have interactions with AI that maybe aren't the best because it's young and experimental and who the hell knows where this technology is going, but it's fine. It's not damaging your child. It's not kind of substituting for a parent's love or whatever you're worried about. And having a child have a positive relationship to technology, and a kind of intentionally curated one where they don't see it as, they're not kind of like, hooked on it like a crack addict or whatever the exact fear is, but like, like it's a tool. Like, they use it for some things, they don't use it for other things. It's part of the tapestry of their lives. That is very valuable. And you can't do that. You can't help a child do that if there's no exposure whatsoever. So if you really wanted to be a Puritan about it and kind of cut out technology, I mean, if you wanted to do it for the first few years, like whatever, like that's not how I do it, but it's understandable given the state of things. But if you really want to take that stance, like, I mean, years ago, I thought it was crazy when parents told their kids to not get on Instagram, like parents keeping their kids off of Instagram when they were like 15. Like, I mean, you're going to war with your child over that, and you're not doing them any favors, in my view. There might be context in which that makes sense as a parent and as a child, kind of depending on where you're at in your relationship. But like, you're sending them out into the world, like, in a few years, like when they're 15, and like, it's hard for me to see how you're doing them any favors by kind of cutting them off from the tools that they're going to have in 5 seconds.
What are the parameters that you put around screen times with your kids, and especially with Alice, the 4-year-old? How are you because you said she's texting, like what is the access that she has to that? Can she text anytime she wants? Who's she texting? How much time does she spend on screens? How are you doing this in a way that's not just sucking her down the rabbit hole of the little dopamine hits of the internet?
Well, texting is, she can text, I think, 5 people, maybe 6, grandpa, me, her mother, her 4-year-old friend, the science teacher that we know, maybe 1 or 2 other people that I'm forgetting about. Those are the only people she can text. Um, those are the only people she can receive text messages from too. I can see everything that she sends and receives. And she can do it as much as she wants, honestly. Like, it's just, I mean, we've never had it be the case where she, like, did this for 9 hours a day, 2 days in a row, and didn't do anything else and went into zombie mode. Like, it's like hard work for a 4-year-old to write out a text message or to read a text message. I mean, this is
What is
part of
she
why
texting on? Does she have her own device?
an iPad, yeah.
An iPad, okay.
We set up an iPad for her, yeah. And the iPad can only do send and receive text messages, take photos and videos and look at photos and videos, and type in the Notes app. Those are the only things it can do.
Cool.
And we've deleted every other app or restricted every other app. And if those 3 things are creative activities or productive, they're active. They're activities, like in the sense of they're not things that you're passive about. They're not video games. They're not YouTube. They're not overstimulating. Like, these are digital equivalents of producing something, a photograph, a piece of writing or something like that, or looking at things that you've produced. But we've let her watch TV since she was 1. And we have parameters around that too. Like, I mean, in general, we've kind of pushed towards things and introduced her to things that are longer and more complicated, also higher quality, but just as a kind of first baseline. Like, if a 20-month-old sits down to watch a 90-minute movie, The Little Mermaid is one of the first things that she watched. That is really hard for them to follow. It's also, like, emotionally complex. Like, there are scary things that happen. There are happy things that happen. Like, there are songs. There's a lot that's happening. It's not overstimulating in the way that YouTube Shorts are. I mean, it is stimulating, and that's part of the reason why children like it. But there's something, like, when you watch a child, at least when I watched my child watching it, it was a very active process. She was, like, responding to it. She had a lot of questions. She would talk about it the next day. Like, this is not like you zone out while scrolling TikTok and, like, you don't remember anything, like, a week from now, and it was just brain candy. Like, it was the opposite of that. And that kind of pattern, I mean, in general, I want to introduce, when it's fiction, I want to introduce her to things with plots that are a little bit over her head, ideally, and that she has to kind of push herself to understand, just at the edge of her zone of proximal development. And then there's all sorts of nonfiction things that I think the key is it accessible to her? Is it real? Is it non-overstimulating? There's all sorts of, like, you can get, like, one of the first things that we showed her was, like, 2 hours of footage of penguins walking around from a camera that was stationed on some Antarctic science observatory or something. So, just like, it's like the doorbell camera, basically. And there's no movement. There's no cuts. It's just like 2 hours of a penguin. Or Tokyo Walks. There's a great YouTube channel where a guy just walks around Tokyo holding a Steadicam very slowly and just looks at different things. Like, child watches that, they love it, they get interested, they learn something about penguins or something about Tokyo, and then they lose interest because it's not that stimulating, and reality can compete with it. So there's a lot of things in that category. There's better, as she's gotten older, some better educational content that we're still pretty selective over. But yeah, I mean, she's 4, so, like, I'm sure that, like, a huge portion of your listeners with kids are like thinking in their heads, like, wait until she's 12, the shit show hasn't even started yet, right? So, which is true. But I'm playing it by ear.
You said that the texting she's doing relates to the Montessori classroom writing education and reading and writing education she's getting. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so very short version is that Montessori has a phonics-based curriculum. It was one of the first really systematic early childhood phonics-based curriculums. It's what made Montessori famous, is this curriculum. And it's a very opinionated curriculum. Like, there is a scope and sequence that you go through, and you learn the alphabet, you learn digraphs, you learn phonemes, And one of the unique things about the curriculum to this day that differentiates it from other phonics-based approaches is that there is a phase in Montessori literacy where you cannot yet read fluently, but you can write. So there's a writing before reading aspect to this, where it's not that you can't read. Maybe you can't literally read a word, but maybe it's just, it takes you a really long time to sound it out. You're not that good at phonemic blending. You yourself didn't write this word, so you're seeing this word on the page and you know what each of the letters are. And often in phonics-based approaches, it's like you can go cat, but it's like turning that into cat is like a separate exercise that you need to teach children how to do. So Montessori's solution to that is to say, like, don't worry about doing that exercise, because if you're not reading the word, but you're writing the word, it's a non-issue. You know how the word sounds in your head, and you can translate that, kind of transliterate it from auditory to grapheme form, phoneme to grapheme form, even if you can't do the decoding of it in the reading phase. So there's this writing before reading approach. The best short form writing that a child can do, a 4-year-old child can do, a 3-year-old child can do, it turns out, is text messaging. It's awesome. You have a keyboard, so you don't need to be able to write the letters by hand. You can find them. And also, by the way, you're learning how to type. The keyboard is interesting. The keyboard is not that dissimilar from a Montessori movable alphabet, which is another tool that you use to scaffold writing. The messages are short. Like you're talking like one word to like, I don't know, a couple dozen words at most. It's the right length for a child to be practicing. And you can send it to an actual person who you care about, who's not there, and they can write back. Like, it's like, in the Montessori classroom, you compose words and sentences that you're interested in and that you want to express with the movable alphabet, which is great. I love those exercises. They're very valuable. But like how much, it's like adding an extra bit of coolness that like you can text your 4-year-old friend and he can text you back. And you can have a kind of asynchronized conversation. So yeah, a lot of the writing that she did in this kind of writing before reading phase, which lasted for her, I don't know, 6 months, maybe 9 months. A lot of it was on the iPad. A lot of it was also at school, and it was completely compatible. Like, it reinforced what she was doing at school. It didn't undermine it at all. It was just, she'd come home and she'd spend 45 minutes trying to read a text message and 30 minutes trying to write one. That's reading practice. So
how do you think about the potential for technology and Montessori overlapping? Because a lot of a Montessori education, at least from the outside looking in, appears to lean very heavily on the physical, the tactile,
Yep.
and the student teacher or student guide relationship, which is also true of a lot of innovative school models. There's a subset of innovative schools that lean very heavily on technology, but quite a few of them follow this sort of school of thought that a child in a physical space with an adult teacher or guide who's very directly connected to them is the best environment for learning and also the best sort of interface for teaching. How do you see technology interfacing with this? Because a lot of the philosophy was developed before computers existed. So it was made for a different world using the tools of a different world.
Yeah, I think it's true that being in an environment with a mentor or a teacher who knows their stuff and who cares about you and who respects you, and where there's a bunch of other students who are smart and want to learn, that is the best learning environment. That's true even if you can learn how to, I learned how to program on my own, when I was 13, just because I had a computer and I could figure it out and I could start with simple things. And it was a kind of prepared environment for me to figure things out. And there's been all sorts of things that I figured out in my life. But would I have learned faster and would it have been better if somehow that had to happen in some kind of utopian school context? Yeah, I would have loved to have had friends that were doing the same thing as me instead of being the nerdy outcast. I would have loved to have teachers that actually knew how to answer my questions instead of trying to look it up on Yahoo. Google didn't even exist yet. And in fact, part of the value of the internet was that it was social enough. I could hop on a forum or Usenet or something like that and ask questions and kind of get some sort of de minimis social connection to get my questions answered. So even there, it wasn't a kind of purely non-social environment. I think one of the reasons why people are nervous about technology is that they feel like it's going to replace that. and I don't think it ever will. Um, I just it's hard for me to imagine what that would look like. Humans love other humans and need other humans and like providing value to other humans, and there's all sorts of ways that technology is part of that can be part of that process, but is it going to supplant it? Like I don't see it. Like the internet has its whatever. I mean, I'm going on tangent about this. Um, um, how do I see technology interfacing with Montessori? I think that so in early childhood Montessori classrooms, I don't think it's impossible that there would be software tools that a child interface with that could work very well in that environment, but nobody has designed anything close. So when I say this, I think when people think of it, they picture existing technology in some form in a classroom. I mean, nobody's designed an operating system and hardware set up for 4-year-olds in the way that Montessori designed a whole set of curricular materials that are made out of wood and metal for 4-year-olds. That is creative, hard pedagogical, technical work. It would involve a sustained collaboration between world-class designers and world-class teachers of a kind that I've never seen at the early childhood level. Um, I think, I mean, is it possible? Should we be pursuing that? Yeah, I think it would be great. I don't know exactly how to set it up or exactly how to fund it, but I think it's definitely worth running these kinds of experiments. Like I could imagine a world in which there was a dedicated touchscreen device that was an even simpler, even more child-friendly version of an iPad that could do even fewer things, and where the software keyboard just was the Montessori movable alphabet in some way, and maybe it even had RFID with the wooden tools so that they could talk in a certain way. And in those circumstances, teachers give a lesson on text messaging or something like that. And text messaging starts not with 4-year-olds, but with 3-year-olds, and it starts in the same classroom or between two classrooms of the same school or something like that. And it's just part of how you learn how to write. I could envision that, but you cannot do that by doing what I did with my daughter only worked because it was at home and because I was supervising it. It's not a scalable solution to a classroom that kind of, it just requires a lot of thought to kind of put that into a classroom. There's a lot of things about Montessori though that are like, I mean, a little bit of a tangent, but like, you know, Montessori has practical life and they teach you how to like polish a table and how to squeeze an orange and like all these other things, like set flowers, fix things, glue things together that are broken. They don't teach you how to like take out a battery and to replace a battery. Like there's a way that like batteries didn't exist when Montessori was alive. Like there's a way that the kind of curriculum just needs, it needs to be a little bit more responsive to things that children actually get exposed to and do, especially when it comes to practical things that children actually can do and would find empowering. And it's just not there. And technology kind of falls under that heading, in my view.
You've spent a lot of time delving into different AI education projects. And I get the sense that in general, you're pretty bullish about AI and education and what's possible and what it's opening up. You can correct me if that's a misrepresentation. But I'm curious what projects you're most interested in or what you've seen that you're most excited about or what you haven't seen that you'd like to see in terms of where you see the potential lying.
I'm bullish-ish on AI as a kind of ongoing technological primitive that people get great value out of, and that should somehow impact education in some way. But every particular AI project I see in education, I'm like bearish on. So there's a disconnect. So I mean, one of the questions for AI is like, if you kind of look at the internet, you know, the recent history of the internet, there was like the AOL era of like 1995 where people were like getting CDs in the mail and discs in the mail and dialing up to an internet provider. And I mean, there was even a pre-area before that where it was just university researchers. And then there was the broadband era in the early 2000s. And then there was the smartphone era starting in 2007. And it's really in 2007, 2008, 2009. That's actually when people got on the internet. And it became really integrated into people's lives is with smartphones. Everything before that was kind of a prehistory. Where are we with AI? Is it 2007? Is it 1995? Like, it's very hard to say. It's very, very hard to say. And I tend to think that it's earlier than people think. I think I don't think that we know how to integrate this with the things that we want and how to capture value from it. It's a fascinating, fascinating tool. Even in its current form, I use it a lot. Even if it's in its current form, I expect it to be used more and more. Even way out. I mean, in some ways, the most exciting things for AI is not language models. It's like self-driving cars and medical research and things like that. And that I'm sure that investment will continue to be plowed in that, even if LLMs plateau. I don't know. I mean, so a few broad categories. There are student-facing tools that people are developing and working on, like kind of tutor replacements. There are tools that do things like, I'm interested in model rockets. Great. Like the LLM tool will come up with a customized, individualized plan that includes links to how-tos and YouTube videos and like instructions for like how to build your first model rocket. So there's that kind of thing. I've worked a lot on creating explanations that are perfect for children. One of my views in education is that most answers to children's questions are actually bad, like not wrong, just like not great answers that answer the child's question where they're at and kind of stimulate them in the right way to kind of wanting to learn more. And so I've worked on like, what are the pedagogical principles behind good explanations? Can I make an LLM generate only a good explanation if I kind of prompt it correctly and engineer it correctly and get the flow correctly around it? There are quite a number of people trying to use AI as a tool for teachers. This makes the most sense to me as a kind of product market, just because I'm long teachers in a sense. I'm bullish on teachers. Like I don't think teachers are going anywhere. I think the world wants and needs teachers. So like, imagine a tool that makes it much easier for a teacher to create lesson materials around what they're teaching, or individualized lesson materials. Imagine a tutor that's kind of getting individualized lesson materials. A lot of time as a teacher is spent prepping that kind of thing. Like, could AI help? Could AI cut it down? So yeah, I mean, there are people working, there's homework support and tutoring, homework help that kind of falls under the heading of student-facing tutoring. There are other things too, but those are probably broadly the main categories that I'm familiar with. I wish every single person who's working on every single one of these projects great success. And I've worked on some of them, and I've been pretty impressed with some of my work on some of them, in terms of like, wow, I didn't think that I could get the LLM to be this good. None of them are, I don't know if any of them are like double-digit % bets in terms of market penetration and success, and these companies will be around in 5 years. That doesn't mean that somebody else won't come up with something, or these problems won't be solved, or the technology won't get better. And, what I predict happening is ChatGPT voice will get better and better. AI voice will get better and better. AI voice interfaces. One of the great things about AI is that it's very good at voice. The answers will get better and better. And people will just start using the general purpose tools. Children and students will just start like in the same way that like I mean, do you think of like YouTube as ed tech?
No.
Right. So like I think ed tech might end up just being general purpose AI tools that we use for other kinds of things and queries and help, and like students and teachers use them too. And like that's a very plausible way for things to turn out.
Do you think that it's good for a parent to, or like a benefit to the child, if a parent encourages them to use ChatGPT as a research tool and an editing tool? Like I'm talking like a middle school, high school age bracket. Do you think that's a good thing?
Yes, I do. I think that that's a good thing. With the, I guess I would have the default hypothesis that it's a good thing for the same reason that a default hypothesis that I have is that adults should probably use LLMs a little bit more than they do on average. Like, they're very useful. They're not kind of what I or other people had hoped that they would be at this point. So they have limitations, but I still use them every day. And like, even if you don't use them every day, like, do you use them once a week? Like, how often do you search the internet? Like, how often do you cook and like not want to scroll through a recipe for pumpkin pie that tells you a story about the meaning of autumn? You just want the goddamn recipe. Like, LLMs are much better at that than the internet. So, I mean, there's all sorts of use cases for them. Even like one of my most common AI use cases is image recognition, because my daughter brings in weird bugs from outside and I don't know what they are, and I look them up and then we read about that bug. That's AI, like, right? So AI image recognition of animals has gotten pretty impressive. I mean, why wouldn't you want a kid to be able to do those things?
This is my last question. If a teenager came to you and said, I'm using ChatGPT to write my essays for my school assignments because they're kind of a waste of time anyway, and it can do a perfectly adequate job, and then I can, go do something else that I think is a better use of my time. But effectively, that teenager is cheating on their assignments. What would you tell them?
I mean, I would say a couple of things. So one is, I would want to know, I mean, it would be a conversation. I would want to know how they think about it. Like, do they think about it as, I am cheating, this is a temporary thing in a temporary situation that I don't want to be in, that I'm effectively like, because of truancy laws, I have to be in high school. Like, I would be doing something different with my life if it wasn't for this. This is my way of minimizing school so that I can get the most out of the rest of my life. Versus like, school actually matters to them and they're trying to get into the best college and they're using cheating to get into the best college that they can. Like, that is I mean, the latter is like, you're dissimulating, like you're being dishonest, and the conversation has to go in a moral direction. The former is like, I mean, I could imagine a very, very high agency situation in which I would be pretty sympathetic to that student, a student who was like unusually thoughtful about it. But for the student that was unusually thoughtful about it, I would also say, where are you at in your writing? And I would start a conversation about writing skills and like, what they have so far, how they see writing fitting into their life, their favorite authors. I might start recommending them things to read. Like I mean, I would kind of move the conversation in the direction of, hey, the things that ChatGPT is writing for you for your school essay, probably the writing isn't that good. It's not that good. I did, for the University of Austin, I did one of their forbidden courses 18 months ago. These were very bright high school students, sophomores, juniors, seniors mostly. And somehow I ended up teaching a forbidden course on AI. I don't know. It's the same reason you're talking to me, I guess. Like, there are no experts, so the standards are very low and I can become an expert.
Tweet about it, therefore you're qualified.
Exactly. But one of the things that I did with them is I gave them real prompts from this was 18 months ago, so probably the 2022 English AP. And I was like, you're going to prompt GPT, you're going to divide into groups and you're going to try to figure out how to prompt GPT into writing an essay that gets you a 4 or 5 on this exam. I think the essays max out at 4 points or something like that. And then the additional points come by accumulation. And like, I shared with them the rubric, like they're publicly available grading rubrics. Like, the questions are real. And like, the essays that they produced were so bad. Like, they were so bad. Like, it was like 2s. Most of the essays were 2s. Like, could not even stick with a simple thesis in response to the prompt, much less support it with detailed arguments that stayed focused and on point. Now, this was 18 months ago, so have the tools gotten better? Yes. Have people gotten better at prompting? Yes. Am I saying that this is impossible to do just with ChatGPT? No, I'm not saying it's impossible. I just think if you want to get an LLM to do good writing, you basically have to be a good writer. And that at that point, why not just get the skill and learn how to use it, because you're going to use it for a million other things. Like, I'm pretty confident in my ability to take any 15 or 16-year-old and talk them into taking writing seriously. But that is a rare skill. Like, that is not a skill that is embedded in the U.S. secondary education system. So that's the approach that I would take. One, are you lying? and being dishonest to yourself? If so, let's have a conversation about character and why it matters. 2, even if you're not lying, like how much does writing matter to you? Are you getting writing practice elsewise? Let's talk about it.
Maybe that's the topic of the next time you come on the show, is how to get your kids to actually value writing. I have a lot of thoughts on this too. That would be fun. Thank you so much for taking the time for this. Thank you for humoring all of my questions. This has been very fun.
It's my pleasure.
All right, my friends, that is a wrap for today. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that you found this valuable. Please leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Please like the video on YouTube. And please don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you listen to make sure that you don't miss next week's episode. Thank you so much, friends. I will see you next week.